You are not losing because you are weak. You are losing because you are rushing. Speed makes you visible, emotional, predictable, and predictable people are easy to control. Power does not live in urgency. Power lives in timing. The world rewards the calm, the patient, the deliberate, not the frantic. Every time you rush, you leak authority. Every time you pause, you gain leverage. This book will teach you one truth. The slower you move, the harder you are to break. Speed feels powerful. That's the illusion. Fast reactions feel strong because they give you the sensation of control. You answer quickly, you decide quickly, you respond instantly. You think that makes you sharp, efficient, dominant. It doesn't. It makes you exposed. Fast reactions reveal your emotional wiring. They show people exactly what touches you, what moves you, what triggers you. And once your triggers are visible, you are no longer in control. You are manageable. You have a choice. You can react fast and give people a map to your mind, or you can slow down and become unreadable. That's the key. Predictability is submission. Every time you react immediately, you teach the world how to use you. Your anger shows what insults work. Your excitement shows what tempts you. Your defensiveness shows where you feel weak. You think you're expressing yourself. What you're really doing is advertising your buttons. And people press buttons. Not because they're evil, but because human nature exploits patterns. Salesmen exploit urgency. Manipulators exploit emotion. Weak leaders exploit speed. Anyone who wants something from you studies how fast you move. The faster you react, the easier you are to study. Calm people don't give instructions to the world. They create uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens control. When someone can't predict you, they hesitate. When they hesitate, you gain leverage. When you gain leverage, you gain power. You don't need their permission to slow down. Most people rush because they think speed equals competence. They think pausing makes them look unsure. They think silence makes them look weak. That's backwards. Silence makes other people uncomfortable because it removes their script. They don't know what comes next. They don't know how you'll respond. And when they don't know, they start talking. They start revealing. They start overplaying their hand. That's the key. Speed puts you on defense. Calm puts you in command. Look at arguments. The person who gets emotional first loses, always, because emotion accelerates speech, exaggerates claims, and collapses logic. The calm person doesn't need to win fast. They let the other person exhaust themselves. Predictability is submission. Fast people explain themselves too much. They justify. They rush to be understood. They rush to be accepted. They rush to close the gap of silence. But silence is not a gap. Silence is a tool. You have a choice. You can fill silence with words, or you can let silence do the work for you. Power doesn't chase clarity. Power allows confusion to expose others. This is not about being slow in action. This is about being slow in reaction. There's a difference. Discipline knows when to move fast and when to wait. Weakness moves fast all the time. It's not about speed. It's about control. That's the key. Fast reactions come from emotional debt, from the need to prove, from the fear of missing out, from the anxiety of being judged, from the habit of living externally instead of internally. When someone speaks to you and you respond instantly, you're not choosing, you're reflexing, and reflexes are programmable. Anyone who can program your reflexes owns you. You don't need their permission to pause. Pausing is not hesitation. Pausing is assessment. Strong people assess before they act. Weak people act before they think. Predictability is submission. Watch powerful people. They don't rush answers. They don't rush decisions. They don't rush reactions. They sit comfortably in the moment. They let time stretch. They let others grow impatient. Impatience reveals need. Need is weakness. That's the key. When you slow your reactions, three things happen immediately. First, you see more. Speed narrows perception. Calm expands it. When you're not rushing to respond, you're observing tone, posture, intent, and subtext. Second, you feel less. Emotional spikes fade when you don't feed them with action. Most emotions burn out if you don't obey them. Third, you gain authority. People respect what doesn't scramble. They trust what doesn't flinch. You have a choice. You can keep reacting the way you always have, or you can retrain yourself to pause. Here's the discipline. When someone challenges you, pause. When someone pressures you, pause. When someone provokes you, pause. When someone praises you, pause. Yes, even praise. Because praise can speed you up just as much as anger can. It can pull you into performance mode. It can make you careless. It can make you chase validation. You don't need their permission to stay centered. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being unmoved. That's the key. Predictable people are easy to flatter, easy to anger, easy to rush, easy to control. Unpredictable people are respected even when they are quiet, especially when they are quiet. This chapter is not telling you to move slowly in life. It's telling you to stop letting the world set your tempo. When someone else controls your speed, they control your direction. Predictability is submission. Slow your reactions and you reclaim authorship of your behavior. You stop living on autopilot. You stop leaking information. You stop giving free access to your emotional operating system. You become harder to read, harder to manipulate, harder to rush. That's power. You mastered the understanding that speed exposes you. Now, let's go deeper, because urgency itself is a weapon used against you.
Urgency feels important. That's why it works. Urgency tells you now or never. Urgency tells you decide fast. Urgency tells you act before you think. And most people obey it without question. But here's the truth you need to hear clearly. Urgency is not strength. Urgency is fear in disguise. That's the key. When you feel rushed, it's not because the moment is powerful. It's because you're afraid of losing something. Time, opportunity, approval, control. You have a choice. You can obey urgency and act from fear, or you can slow down and act from authority. Urgency exists to bypass your judgment. It compresses time so you don't ask questions. It pressures you so you don't evaluate consequences. It overwhelms you so you don't notice manipulation. Salespeople use it. Media uses it. Toxic people use it. Weak leaders use it. Anyone who wants control over you introduces urgency. That's the key. Fear does not say, think carefully. Fear says, hurry. Fear does not want wisdom. Fear wants movement. Any movement, even the wrong one. And when you move from fear, you always pay later. Urgent decisions feel relieving in the moment. The pressure drops, the anxiety quiets. You feel like you did something. But relief is not power. Relief is just the absence of tension, not the presence of control. You don't need their permission to wait. Most mistakes people regret were made under urgency, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lacked patience. Urgency narrows your options. It makes bad deals look necessary. It makes bad relationships feel inevitable. It makes bad decisions feel justified. That's the key. Urgency lies to you about consequences. It says, if you don't act now, everything collapses. That's almost never true. Strong people understand something weak people don't. Most things improve when you don't rush them. Predictability is submission, and urgency makes you predictable. When people know you panic under time pressure, they know exactly how to move you. They create deadlines, they escalate emotion, they dramatize stakes, and you comply. Not because you're incapable, but because you're untrained. You have a choice. You can keep reacting to urgency like it's real, or you can question it every time it appears. Here's the discipline. Whenever you feel rushed, assume manipulation until proven otherwise. That pause alone restores power. Ask yourself, who benefits if I act fast? What happens if I wait 24 hours? What am I afraid of losing right now? Fear hates questions. Authority invites them. That's the key. Urgency is often artificial. Deadlines can be negotiated. Pressure can be absorbed. Silence can be held. But fear doesn't want you to know that. Fear wants speed because speed prevents perspective. Look at your past, the jobs you took too fast, the words you said too quickly, the commitments you made under pressure, the money you spent impulsively. Those weren't logic failures, those were urgency failures. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. You don't need their permission to slow down. Calm people intimidate urgent people because calm people don't move when pushed. They don't break rhythm. They don't sink to someone else's panic. They stay centered. That's power. Urgency tries to infect you emotionally. It says, everyone else is moving, why aren't you? It tries to shame you into speed. Ignore it. The crowd is usually wrong, and the crowd is always rushed. Predictability is submission. When urgency controls you, you live reactively. You live externally. You let circumstances dictate behavior. When patience controls you, you live deliberately. You choose your moves. You control your tempo. That's the key. Here's a rule to live by. Anything that requires you to abandon calm is not worth having. Real opportunities allow thought. Real power allows time. Real decisions don't demand panic. Fear demands panic. Urgency and fear are twins. You never see one without the other. And the moment you feel urgency rise, your job is simple. Slow everything down. Slow your breath. Slow your speech. Slow your body. Your nervous system leads your mind. When your body slows, clarity returns. You have a choice. You can let urgency hijack your nervous system, or you can train yourself to resist it. That training is what separates controlled people from powerful ones. It's not about speed, it's about command. That's the key. People will test you with urgency. They will push timelines. They will exaggerate consequences. They will make you feel irresponsible for waiting. Let them. Waiting is not irresponsibility. Waiting is strategy. Silence under pressure is strength. When you don't rush, people reveal the truth. They soften, they negotiate, they expose what was fake. Urgency collapses when you don't feed it. Predictability is submission. The more you resist urgency, the calmer you become. The calmer you become, the harder you are to manipulate. The harder you are to manipulate, the more power you carry without saying a word. This chapter is not telling you to procrastinate. It's telling you to stop confusing pressure with importance. There is a difference between decisive action and fearful speed. Decisive action comes from clarity. Fearful speed comes from anxiety. One builds power, the other destroys it. That's the key. You learned that urgency is fear wearing a mask. Now it's time to understand who uses that fear against you. You resisted the rush. Now let's talk about manipulation itself.
Impatience is not a flaw. It's an opening, and the world knows it. The moment you become impatient, you become usable. You become steerable. You become easy to influence without force. That's the key. The world does not manipulate the strong. It manipulates the hurried. You have a choice. You can live impatient and be constantly nudged, pressured, and pulled. Or you can slow down and become resistant to influence. Manipulation doesn't start with lies. It starts with speed. People rush you so you don't think. They overwhelm you so you don't notice patterns. They pressure you so you don't ask questions. And most people fall for it, not because they're stupid, but because they're impatient. Predictability is submission. If someone knows you hate waiting, they control you. They delay responses to trigger anxiety. They dangle outcomes to keep you hooked. They set artificial timelines to rush your decisions. And you comply. Sales is built on impatience. Politics is built on impatience. Social media is built on impatience. Everything is optimized to shorten your attention and accelerate your reactions. Why? Because impatient people don't resist. That's the key. Impatience creates emotional hunger. Hunger for results, hunger for closure, hunger for reassurance. And hungry minds accept bad deals just to feel full. You don't need their permission to wait. When someone says, "This offer expires today," they're not stating a fact, they're testing your discipline. They're asking one question silently: can I rush you? When someone demands an immediate response, they're not seeking clarity, they're seeking control. Strong people recognize this immediately. Weak people mistake pressure for importance. You have a choice. You can treat urgency as authority, or you can treat it as a signal to slow down. That pause alone breaks most manipulation. That's the key. Manipulators rely on emotional momentum. They push, escalate, dramatize. They don't want stillness. Stillness gives you perspective, and perspective kills manipulation. Perspective asks questions. Perspective sees alternatives. Perspective notices exaggeration. Impatience skips all of that. Impatience says, "just do something." And manipulators love that sentence. Predictability is submission. Look at how arguments work. The impatient person wants resolution now. They want to win now. They want relief now. So they say too much. They reveal too much. They compromise too much. The patient person doesn't chase resolution. They let the other person reveal themselves. Silence is uncomfortable, but only for the one who needs control. That's the key. Social pressure works the same way. Everyone rushing in one direction creates the illusion of certainty, but certainty created by speed is fragile. The crowd moves fast because the crowd doesn't think. You don't need their permission to step back. Impatience makes you outsource judgment. You stop thinking independently and start copying movement. You assume speed equals correctness. It doesn't. Fast crowds have always been wrong. Slow individuals change history. Think about it. The biggest mistakes, financial, emotional, relational, were not made in calm. They were made under pressure, under excitement, under fear of missing out. Impatience is emotional intoxication. That's the key. The world trains you to be impatient from childhood. Faster answers, faster results, faster gratification, shorter attention spans. Why? Because patient people are hard to control. Patient people don't click impulsively. They don't buy emotionally. They don't react instantly. They observe. And observation is dangerous to systems built on influence. Predictability is submission. If your reactions are fast, your mind is open for programming. If your attention is scattered, your decisions are weak. This chapter is not about distrusting everyone. It's about recognizing systems. The system rewards speed because speed benefits the system, not you. You have a choice. You can live at the system's pace, or you can reclaim your own tempo. Reclaiming your tempo is an act of rebellion. That's the key. Here's the discipline. When someone pressures you, slow down your speech. When something excites you, delay your action. When you feel pulled emotionally, pause your response. Not forever, just long enough to regain control. Most manipulation collapses in 24 hours. If something is real, it will still exist tomorrow. If it disappears when you wait, it was never solid. You don't need their permission to verify. Impatient people trust first and regret later. Patient people verify first and move last. That's power. Impatience also makes you overshare. You explain yourself because you want to be understood quickly. You reveal plans because you want validation now. You announce moves because you want acknowledgement immediately. And every reveal weakens leverage. Predictability is submission. Power is quiet because power does not need approval to exist. Here's a hard truth. Most people are not trying to help you. They're trying to move you. Not maliciously, strategically. They want outcomes. They want compliance. They want momentum. Your impatience gives it to them. That's the key. Calm disrupts manipulation. When you don't react as expected, scripts fail. When scripts fail, people expose intent. They get frustrated. They overplay pressure. They reveal motives. And suddenly, you see clearly. You have a choice. You can keep being easy to move, or you can become difficult to rush. Difficult to rush means difficult to control. This chapter is not about slowing your ambition, it's about slowing your obedience. You don't stop moving forward, you stop being pushed. That distinction changes everything. Impatience hands power outward. Patience pulls power inward. And power that lives inward cannot be taken. That's the key. You've now seen how the world uses speed against you. You've seen how impatience opens the door to influence. Now it's time to understand the counterweapon, the one that neutralizes all of this. You resisted urgency. You resisted manipulation. Now you learn how to dominate without force.
Calm is not passive. Calm is not soft. Calm is not weakness. Calm is control. And control is power. That's the key. Most people misunderstand calm because they confuse it with submission. They think staying calm means letting things slide, letting people cross lines, letting life push them around. That's wrong. Calm is not the absence of strength. Calm is contained strength. You have a choice. You can let emotions spill out and be managed by the environment, or you can contain them and manage the environment yourself. Calm people don't need to dominate loudly. Their presence does the work. Think about this. Why does calm make aggressive people uncomfortable? Because aggression feeds on reaction. Anger needs opposition. Pressure needs panic. Manipulation needs emotion. Calm gives them nothing. That's the key. When you stay calm, you remove the fuel. You don't escalate. You don't rush. You don't mirror chaos. And when chaos isn't mirrored, it collapses. Calm is not inaction. Calm is precision. Predictability is submission. Emotional people are predictable. They get angry on schedule. They get defensive on cue. They get excited on demand. And once people know what moves you, they control when you move. Calm breaks that pattern. Calm creates uncertainty, and uncertainty weakens control. You don't need their permission to stay centered. Most people lose power not because they're wrong, but because they react. They let emotion hijack timing. They let tone dictate behavior. They let pressure rush decisions. Calm interrupts that entire cycle. That's the key. Here's a truth most people never learn. The calmer you are, the more dominant you appear. Not because you're intimidating, but because you're unmovable. Unmovable people force others to adjust. Watch negotiations. The person who stays calm sets the pace. The person who gets emotional concedes ground. The person who needs resolution first loses leverage. Calm stretches time. Emotion compresses it. Power lives in stretched time. You have a choice. You can speed up when others push,
or you can slow down and force them to match you. That's dominance. Calm also protects your nervous system. Emotional reactivity keeps your body in survival mode, heart racing, thoughts scattered, judgment impaired. Calm brings your system back under command. When your body is calm, your mind becomes strategic. That's the key. This is not about suppressing emotion. Suppression explodes later. This is about non-identification. You notice emotion without obeying it. Anger shows up. You don't move. Fear shows up. You breathe. Excitement shows up. You pause. You have a choice. Emotion can speak, but it does not get to drive. Calm is the hand on the wheel. Predictability is submission. If people can predict your emotional spikes, they can plan around you. They can bait you. They can rush you. They can distract you. If they can't read you, they hesitate. And hesitation shifts power. That's the key. Calm also changes how people treat you long-term. People test boundaries emotionally first. They push, they provoke, they apply pressure. If you react emotionally, they learn they can move you. If you stay calm, they adjust behavior. Not because you demanded respect, but because you demonstrated self-command. You don't need their permission to be composed. Here's the discipline. When conflict appears, slow your breathing before you speak. When insult appears, lower your tone instead of raising it. When pressure appears, reduce movement. Your body leads your mind. Slow body, clear mind, controlled response. That's the key. Calm is also a weapon against intimidation. Intimidation relies on creating fear. Fear needs emotional response. Calm starves fear. When someone tries to intimidate you and you don't react, their power evaporates. They escalate, they repeat, they lose credibility. Calm exposes insecurity. Predictability is submission. Most people escalate when they feel ignored. Calm makes them feel invisible. And invisibility unsettles ego-driven behavior. This is why silence plus calm is devastating. You're not engaging their game. You're not validating their urgency. You're not feeding their emotion. You're operating on a different level. That's power. You have a choice. You can meet emotion with emotion and create chaos, or you can meet emotion with calm and create control. Calm also protects your future. Emotional reactions create consequences that outlast the moment. Words you can't take back, decisions you regret, bridges you burn. Calm preserves options. That's the key. Powerful people protect optionality. They don't close doors impulsively. They don't overcommit emotionally. They don't overreact socially. They stay calm. Calm keeps doors open while others slam them shut. Predictability is submission. If your reactions are loud and fast, people learn when to avoid you and when to use you. If your reactions are measured, people approach you carefully. Careful people don't cross lines easily. That's leverage. This chapter is not telling you to be nice. Calm is not niceness. Calm can say no. Calm can enforce boundaries. Calm can end conversations. Calm just does it without leaking emotion. You don't need their permission to disengage. In fact, disengagement is often the strongest move. When you don't engage emotionally, you deny others access to your energy, and energy is currency. That's the key. Calm also trains others how to communicate with you. When you don't respond to drama, drama stops coming. When you don't reward chaos, chaos looks elsewhere. Your calm reshapes your environment. You have a choice. You can be shaped by chaos, or you can shape chaos with calm. One makes you reactive, the other makes you authoritative. Calm is not something you wait to feel, it's something you practice, daily, intentionally. Slow walks, controlled breathing, delayed responses, reduced explanations.
These are not habits of weakness, they are habits of command. Predictability is submission. When calm becomes your default, speed loses its grip on you. Urgency stops working. Manipulation fails. You don't rush. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You observe, you decide, you move when you choose. That's power. You've learned that calm is not passive, it's a psychological weapon. You've learned how stillness disarms pressure and emotion. Now it's time to understand the cost of ignoring this discipline. You slowed your reactions, you mastered calm. Now let's talk about what happens when you don't.
Fast decisions feel clean, sharp, final. That's why people love them. They feel decisive, they feel powerful, they feel like action. But most of the damage in your life did not come from bad intentions. It came from fast decisions made under pressure. That's the key. Fast decisions borrow confidence from the moment and charge interest to the future. You have a choice. You can decide fast and pay slowly, or you can decide slowly and compound power. Most people confuse decisiveness with speed. They think if they move quickly, they look strong. They think hesitation equals weakness. But hesitation is not the same as deliberation. Deliberation is strength. Hesitation is fear. Fast decisions usually come from one of three places: fear, ego, or urgency, and none of those are reliable advisors. It's not about intelligence, it's about discipline. That's the key. Look back honestly. The relationships you rushed into, the words you fired off in anger, the money you spent emotionally, the commitments you made without thinking. Those decisions didn't ruin you immediately. They damaged you quietly, over time, in ways you couldn't reverse. Fast decisions don't hurt fast. They hurt later. Predictability is submission. When people know you decide quickly, they rush you on purpose. They push timelines, they exaggerate stakes, they force momentum, and you comply. Not because you agree, but because you haven't trained yourself to slow down. You don't need their permission to wait. Fast decisions collapse optionality. Once you decide quickly, doors close, leverage disappears, alternatives vanish. Slow decisions keep doors open. Power lives in optionality. That's the key. Strong people don't rush life-altering decisions. They sit with discomfort. They tolerate uncertainty. They allow tension to exist without resolving it immediately. Weak people resolve tension fast, even if the resolution is wrong. Think about arguments. The person who apologizes too quickly just to end discomfort often accepts blame they don't deserve. The person who fires back instantly often escalates conflict they could have controlled. Fast decisions trade short-term relief for long-term regret. You have a choice. You can relieve tension quickly, or you can resolve reality correctly. Those are not the same thing. Fast decisions are often emotional obedience. You feel something and you act. Anger becomes words. Excitement becomes commitment. Fear becomes escape. Emotion moves first. Logic follows later. Too late. That's the key. Emotion is a signal, not a command. But fast decisions treat emotion like authority. Slow decisions treat emotion like information. Predictability is submission. If your decisions follow emotion immediately, you are predictable. If there's a delay, you are sovereign. That delay is where power lives. Let's be clear, this is not about procrastination. Procrastination avoids responsibility. Deliberation embraces it. Deliberation says, I will act, but not until I see clearly. You don't need their permission to think. Most people feel pressured to decide because they think waiting looks incompetent, but the opposite is true. Calm deliberation signals depth, maturity, and authority. Rushed decisions signal insecurity. That's the key. Fast decisions also create identity traps. You say yes too fast, and suddenly you're committed to a version of yourself you didn't mean to become. You accept roles, labels, and expectations without fully understanding the cost. Then you spend years undoing one quick yes. One email, one conversation, One emotional moment. That's all it takes. Fast decisions are expensive. You have a choice. You can protect your future self, or you can sacrifice them for present comfort. Most people sacrifice the future to feel strong now. Powerful people endure discomfort now to dominate later. That's the key. Here's a rule that will change your life. Never make permanent decisions in temporary emotional states. Anger is temporary. Fear is temporary. Excitement is temporary. Consequences are not. Slow decisions give emotions time to settle. When emotion settles, clarity rises. When clarity rises, decisions improve. Predictability is submission. If someone can provoke an emotion and get you to decide, they control you. If emotion passes and you're still deciding, you control yourself. This is why silence and time are threatening to manipulative people. They know clarity is coming. You don't need their permission to delay. Here's the discipline. For any decision that affects your money, reputation, relationships, or future, add time. 24 hours minimum, often 72, sometimes weeks. Not because you're unsure, but because you respect consequences. That's the key. Fast decisions feel like courage. Slow decisions require real courage, the courage to face uncertainty without reacting. Anyone can react, few can wait. Waiting builds authority. Waiting builds precision. Waiting builds power. Predictability is submission. Fast decisions also reduce learning. When you decide quickly, you skip data, you skip reflection, you skip perspective. Slow decisions absorb reality. They integrate reality instead of resisting it. Strong people want truth, even if it delays action. Weak people want relief, even if it destroys outcomes. You have a choice. You can move fast and stay blind, or you can move slow and see clearly. That's the key. This chapter is not telling you to become passive, it's telling you to become surgical. There is a time to act fast, but that time is chosen, not forced. Discipline decides speed, emotion does not. When you control the timing of your decisions, you control your life trajectory. Fast decisions hand the steering wheel to the moment. Slow decisions keep it in your hands. Predictability is submission. When you stop making fast decisions, something powerful happens. People stop rushing you. They learn you don't bend under pressure. They learn urgency doesn't work on you. And when urgency fails, manipulation fails. That's power. You've learned that speed exposes you. You've learned that urgency is fear. You've learned that impatience invites manipulation. You've learned that calm is a weapon. Now you're seeing the cost of ignoring all of it. Fast decisions don't just create mistakes, they create patterns of damage, and damage compounds. You slowed your reactions, you controlled your urgency, you used calm. Now it's time to see how speed affects something deeper, your presence, your leadership, your authority. You learned what fast decisions destroy. Now let's talk about what speed drains from you every single day.
Authority is felt before it is spoken, and speed kills that feeling. Fast movement looks active. Fast speech sounds confident. Fast decisions appear decisive. But authority does not live in appearance. Authority lives in presence. That's the key. The faster you move, the less weight you carry. The faster you speak, the less people listen. The faster you decide, the less trust you inspire. You have a choice. You can move fast and look busy, or you can move deliberately and be taken seriously. Authority requires gravity. Gravity requires stillness. Speed removes gravity. Predictability is submission. People with authority are not rushed. They don't scramble. They don't hurry to prove competence. They don't chase approval through action. They let their presence do the talking. When you rush, you communicate one thing clearly. You are reacting, not leading. That's the key. Leaders set tempo. Followers adapt to it.
If you're constantly speeding up to match situations, emotions, or people, you are not setting the pace, you are being dragged by it. And people sense that immediately. You don't need their permission to slow down. Speed also fragments authority. When you move too fast, you skip listening, you interrupt, you overlook details, you misread context. And misreading context destroys credibility. Authority is precision. Speed is approximation. That's the key. Look at how respected figures speak. They pause. They choose words carefully. They don't rush to feel silence. Silence makes others lean in. Fast talk pushes people away. Fast leaders look nervous. Slow leaders look composed. Composure builds trust. Predictability is submission. When people know you rush, they stop respecting your judgment. They know you'll decide before you've seen everything. They know you'll act before you've thought it through. So they manage you. They withhold information. They frame situations emotionally. They rush you on purpose. And suddenly, your authority is symbolic, not real. You have a choice. You can be the title holder, or you can be the authority. Authority is not granted by position, it's earned by behavior. And behavior starts with pace. That's the key. Speed also weakens leadership in conflict. When a leader reacts fast, they validate chaos. They reward drama with attention. They escalate situations that could have been neutralized. Calm authority de-escalates without effort. When you stay slow and measured in tense moments, you signal control. People mirror that control, or they expose themselves as unstable. Either way, you win. Predictability is submission. Authority also depends on restraint. Restraint communicates self-command. Speed communicates lack of it. If you can't control your tempo, why should anyone trust you to control outcomes? That's the question people ask subconsciously. You don't need their permission to practice restraint. Speed is often a compensation. People rush when they don't trust their own value. They overperform to be seen. They overdeliver to be validated. They overreact to stay relevant. But authority never begs for relevance. Authority assumes it. That's the key. Slow movement says, "I'm not afraid of being overlooked." Fast movement says, "Please notice me." And people respond accordingly. Predictability is submission. Speed also drains authority because it makes you accessible at all times. Immediate replies, instant reactions, always available. Availability erodes respect. Scarcity builds it. When people know they can get you instantly, they treat you casually. When access requires patience, they prepare. Authority controls access. That's the key. This doesn't mean becoming distant. It means becoming intentional. You respond when it matters, not when you're summoned emotionally. You have a choice. You can be reactive and reachable, or you can be deliberate and respected. One drains you, the other builds you. Speed also cheapens decisions. When you decide quickly, people question depth. When you decide slowly, people assume thought. Even if the decision is the same, perception matters. Authority is partly perception, and perception is shaped by tempo. Predictability is submission. Here's a hard truth. People don't respect effort. They respect control. Speed looks like effort. Calm looks like control. That's the key. If you want more authority in your work, your relationships, your life, slow down your delivery. Speak slower, move slower, decide slower. Not because you're unsure, but because you are deliberate. Deliberate people don't waste motion. They don't waste words. They don't waste energy. Everything has weight. You don't need their permission to take up space slowly. Here's the discipline. Before you respond, pause 1 second longer than feels uncomfortable. Before you decide, ask one more question than feels necessary. Before you act, check whether speed is serving clarity or avoiding discomfort. That pause is where authority is born. That's the key. Speed also teaches others how to treat you. If you rush, they rush you. If you stay measured, they adjust. People match energy unconsciously, set a slow, grounded pace, and watch the environment shift. Predictability is submission. Authority compounds over time. Small behaviors repeated consistently create reputation. If you are always rushed, your reputation becomes frantic, even if you're competent. If you are consistently calm, your reputation becomes solid, even before results show. That's power. Authority is not loud. Authority is not fast. Authority is stable. Stability requires control over tempo. You have a choice. You can keep leaking authority through speed, or you can reclaim it through restraint. This chapter is not telling you to slow ambition, it's telling you to slow expression. You still aim high, you still work hard, you just don't broadcast urgency. Urgency is weakness, composure is strength. That's the key. When you remove speed from your behavior, something unexpected happens. People stop testing you. They stop rushing you. They stop assuming they can move you. They sense boundaries, even if you never state them. Boundaries enforced calmly are the strongest boundaries. Predictability is submission. Speed drains authority because it makes you on the same level as noise. Calm separates you from it. Noise rushes, authority waits. Noise reacts, authority chooses. You don't need their permission to choose your pace. You've now seen how speed weakens your presence. You've seen how authority requires restraint. But authority is not just external, it's internal. And there is one place speed does the most damage: your emotional economy. You learned how speed drains your authority in the world. Now let's talk about how speed drains something even more valuable.
There is physical speed. There is mental speed. And then there is emotional speed. Emotional speed destroys more lives than any other form of movement. That's the key. You can recover from moving fast physically. You can recover from thinking fast mentally. But when emotions move fast, they drag consequences behind them. You have a choice. You can let emotions dictate your tempo, or you can slow emotion down and reclaim control. Emotional speed is reacting before you regulate, speaking before you breathe, acting before you understand what you're feeling. And once emotion takes the wheel, logic becomes a passenger. Predictability is submission. If people can trigger your emotions and get immediate action, they own you in that moment. Anger becomes words, excitement becomes commitment, fear becomes avoidance. Emotional speed turns feelings into commands. That's the key. Most regret is emotional speed in disguise. You didn't mean to say it. You didn't plan to do it. You didn't want the outcome. But emotion moved faster than discipline, and discipline arrived too late. You don't need their permission to feel, and you don't need to obey the feeling either. That distinction is power. Strong people feel deeply. Weak people act immediately. Emotional speed also drains energy. Every emotional spike costs you focus, clarity, and recovery time. When you react fast emotionally, you stay activated longer. Your nervous system never settles. And a dysregulated nervous system makes bad decisions feel urgent. That's the key. Emotion is not the enemy. Unregulated emotion is. Emotion gives information, it does not give instruction. But emotional speed blurs that line. Predictability is submission. If you're known as hot-headed, people bait you. If you're known as overexcited, people hype you into bad deals. If you're known as sensitive, people tiptoe or manipulate. Your emotional speed becomes your label. You have a choice. You can let emotions define your reputation, or you can regulate them and define yourself. Regulation is not suppression. Suppression explodes later. Regulation is spacing. Space between feeling and action. That space is everything.
That's the key. Here's the hard truth. Emotional speed is addictive. Anger feels powerful. Excitement feels alive. Drama feels important. So people chase the feeling. They don't realize the cost. The cost is clarity. The cost is trust. The cost is authority. Predictability is submission. Emotional speed also sabotages relationships. Fast emotions create fast judgments. Fast judgments create fixed narratives. You decide what someone meant before asking. You decide how you feel before understanding context. You react to a story you told yourself. And once you react, damage is done, even if the story was wrong. Slow emotion allows correction. Fast emotion locks in error. That's the key. You don't need their permission to slow emotion down. Here's the discipline. When emotion spikes, do nothing. No message, no decision, no confrontation. Do nothing until the body settles. Breathe, walk, sit, drink water, lower stimulation. Your body calms before your mind does. Slow body, slow emotion, clear thought. That's the key. Emotional speed is especially dangerous because it feels justified. Anger convinces you you're right. Fear convinces you you're protecting yourself. Excitement convinces you you're seizing opportunity. But justification does not equal correctness. Emotion justifies speed. Discipline demands verification. Predictability is submission. If your emotions move faster than your values don't matter. They never get a chance to guide action. Values require delay. Delay is discipline. You have a choice. You can let emotions set the pace, or you can let values set the pace. One creates chaos, the other creates character. That's the key. Emotional speed also shrinks your future. Fast emotional reactions burn bridges you later need. They lock you into positions you later outgrow. They create reputations that follow you. People remember how you made them feel, not what you meant. Slowing emotion protects your long-term leverage. Predictability is submission. Here's a rule to live by. Never trust a thought that arrives with emotional urgency. Urgent thoughts are emotional. Calm thoughts are strategic. Urgent thoughts want release. Strategic thoughts want results. You don't need their permission to question your feelings. Emotional mastery is not about never feeling, it's about never being hijacked. The strongest people are not the coldest, they are the most regulated. That's the key. When you slow emotional speed, everything else slows down. Arguments lose power, manipulation weakens, pressure fades. You stop being reactive, you become grounded. Grounded people are hard to move. Predictability is submission. This chapter is not telling you to become numb, it's telling you to become sovereign. You still feel, you still care, you just don't surrender control. Emotion becomes data, not destiny. You have a choice. You can let emotions set the pace, or you can train emotional discipline. That training is what separates resilience from volatility. You've learned that emotional speed is the most dangerous speed of all. Now it's time to see where that discipline is built. Because emotional control is not mental, it's neurological. You slowed emotion, you regained space. Now let's talk about where that space comes from.
The pause is invisible. That's why most people ignore it. They think power comes from action, from movement, from speed, from doing something, anything, right now. But real power is built before action. It's built in the pause. That's the key. The pause is the space between stimulus and response, between feeling and behavior, between pressure and decision. And whoever owns that space owns the outcome. You have a choice. You can let moments rush you forward, or you can pause and take command of the moment. Most people live without a pause. Life happens, emotion spikes, words spill, decisions land, and only later does reflection arrive.
too late. The pause changes that order. Predictability is submission. Without a pause, your life is a chain of reactions, and reactions are programmable. If the world knows what stimulus gets what response, the world can steer you. The pause breaks the pattern. That's the key. The pause does three things immediately. First, it interrupts emotion. Emotion needs momentum. When you pause, momentum collapses. Second, it restores choice. You stop being pushed by feeling and start acting from intent. Third, it creates authority. People feel when you're not rushed. They sense when you're not reactive. They adjust. You don't need their permission to pause. Most people are terrified of the pause because it feels awkward. Silence feels like weakness. Waiting feels like losing. But discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is just the absence of habit. That's the key. The pause feels uncomfortable because you're used to filling space with reaction. Once you stop, your nervous system panics for a moment. Then it settles. And when it settles, clarity arrives. Power lives there. Predictability is submission. The pause also exposes others. When you pause, people keep talking. They explain, they justify, they reveal intent. Silence pulls truth out of people. Words hide it. That's the key. Look at conversations. The person who pauses after a question often gets more than the person who talks. The person who waits after an insult often gains more respect than the person who fires back. The pause flips dynamics. It moves you from participant to observer. Observers see more. You have a choice. You can stay inside the moment emotionally, or you can step outside it strategically. The pause is that step. The pause is not hesitation. Hesitation is fear. The pause is discipline. Hesitation avoids action. The pause prepares it. That's the key. Here's what most people don't understand. Speed feels powerful because it avoids responsibility. When you act fast, you can blame the moment. You can say, I reacted. You can say, it happened so quickly. The pause removes that excuse. With a pause, your actions are fully yours, and responsibility is heavy. That's why people avoid it. Predictability is submission. The pause also retrains your nervous system. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you teach your body that it is safe to slow down. Over time, calm becomes your baseline, and when calm is your baseline, pressure stops working on you. That's power. You don't need their permission to retrain your body. Here's the discipline. When something triggers you, pause for 1 breath. When something pressures you, pause for 2. When something angers you, pause until your heart rate drops. This is not about counting, it's about control. Your breath is the fastest way back to authority. That's the key. The pause also creates distance between you and outcomes. Distance allows perspective. Perspective allows better decisions. Fast reactions feel personal. Paused responses feel intentional. People trust intentional behavior. Predictability is submission. The pause is especially powerful because it costs nothing, and yet most people refuse to use it. Why? Because ego hates waiting. Ego wants to be seen, heard, validated immediately. The pause starves ego, and starving ego strengthens character. That's the key. Strong people are not impulsive, they are intentional. They allow space between impulse and action. Weak people confuse impulse with authenticity. Impulse is not authenticity. Discipline is. You have a choice. You can express everything you feel, or you can act on what matters. One leaks power, the other concentrates it. The pause concentrates power. Predictability is submission. The pause also protects you from escalation. Most conflicts escalate because neither side pauses. Emotion bounces back and forth, growing louder, faster, more destructive. One pause stops the entire chain. Not by force, by refusal. Refusal to rush, refusal to escalate, refusal to surrender control. That's power. You don't need their permission to refuse the pace. The pause also changes how you see time. Instead of time controlling you, you start controlling time. You decide when to move, when to wait, when to speak. You stop being dragged by urgency. Urgency collapses in the presence of a pause. That's the key. Here's another truth. The pause reveals who is in control. The person who can wait controls the interaction. The person who needs immediate resolution is dependent. Dependence is weakness. Independence requires patience. Predictability is submission. When you build the habit of pausing, something subtle happens. Your confidence stops coming from outcomes and starts coming from self-command. You don't need to win fast. You don't need to respond immediately. You don't need to prove anything. You know you're in control. That's real confidence. You have a choice. You can let moments decide for you, or you can decide after the moment passes. The pause is where that decision is made. The pause is where power accumulates. This chapter is not telling you to slow your life. It's telling you to insert space into it. Space to breathe, space to see, space to choose. Space is freedom. Predictability is submission. When you master the pause, speed loses its threat, urgency loses its grip, emotion loses its authority. You stop reacting, you start commanding. And command is quiet. You've learned that power is built not in motion, it's built in the pause. Now it's time to see what happens when you don't pause, when you speak too quickly, explain too much, and give away leverage with words. You slowed emotion, you claimed the pause. Now let's talk about how speed shows up in your mouth.
Talking fast feels productive. It feels engaging. It feels confident. But most talking is not communication. It's leakage. That's the key. Fast people talk to relieve pressure, to fill silence, to explain themselves, to prove they belong, to make sure they're understood right now. And in doing so, they give away power sentence by sentence. You have a choice. You can speak to express control, or you can speak to escape discomfort. One builds authority, the other exposes you. Predictability is submission. Fast talkers reveal too much. They explain motives, justify decisions, announce plans, narrate emotions. They think transparency builds trust. It doesn't. Restraint builds trust. Powerful people don't rush to be understood. They let others do the work of understanding. That's the key. Silence makes people curious. Curiosity creates attention. Attention creates influence. Fast talk kills curiosity. When you explain everything, there is nothing left to respect. You don't need their permission to be brief. Most people talk too much because they confuse words with value. They think more words equal more substance. But substance doesn't come from volume. It comes from precision. Precision requires slowness. Predictability is submission. Fast people also talk themselves out of leverage. In negotiations, in arguments, in relationships, they say the thing they should have held back. They answer questions no one asked. They offer concessions before pressure appears. They reveal uncertainty before it's detected, all because silence feels uncomfortable. That's the key. Silence is only uncomfortable when you are unsure of your position. If you know where you stand, silence is safe. If you don't, silence feels dangerous. So you talk, and every unnecessary word weakens your position. You have a choice.
You can let silence pressure you into talking, or you can let silence pressure them. Silence shifts discomfort outward. That's power. Fast talk also exposes emotion. Tone rises, speed increases, words stack. The more emotional you are, the faster you speak. And once emotion shows up in your voice, people stop listening to content and start listening for weakness. Predictability is submission. Emotional speech is predictable speech. Calm speech is unreadable. That's the key. Fast people talk because they want resolution. They want the moment to end. They want agreement, closure, validation. But resolution is not always in your favor. Powerful people don't rush resolution. They let tension exist. Tension reveals truth. You don't need their permission to let things sit unresolved. Here's a truth most people avoid. Talking fast is often a sign of internal panic. Panic that you're being judged. Panic that you're losing control. Panic that silence means disapproval. So you fill the space. But silence does not mean disapproval. Silence means nothing until you assign meaning to it. That's the key. Fast people assign meaning quickly. Slow people wait for clarity. And clarity always arrives late, never early. Predictability is submission. Fast talking also creates contradictions. When you speak too much, you say things you don't fully mean. You commit to positions you haven't thought through. You promise things you later regret. Then you spend energy correcting, backtracking, explaining. Silence would have saved you. You have a choice. You can speak once and stand firm, or you can speak constantly and stay unstable. Stability builds authority. That's the key. Look at leaders. The more powerful they are, the fewer words they use, not because they lack ideas, but because they value timing. Words have weight. Weight requires restraint. Fast people throw words around. Slow people place them carefully. Predictability is submission. Fast talk also trains others how to treat you. If you always explain yourself, people expect explanations. If you always justify, people expect justification. If you stay brief, people prepare before speaking to you. They choose words more carefully. They respect your time. That's power. You don't need their permission to stop explaining. Here's the discipline. Before you answer, ask yourself, does this need to be said? Before you explain, ask, did they earn this explanation? Before you speak again, ask, am I adding value or relieving tension? That pause changes everything. That's the key. Fast talk also reveals insecurity. You talk because you want approval. You want reassurance that you're okay, right, accepted. But approval-seeking speech repels respect. Respect comes from self-assurance, not self-disclosure. Predictability is submission. Strong people don't speak to be liked. They speak to be clear. Clarity doesn't require many words. It requires confidence. And confidence grows in silence. You have a choice. You can talk to be seen, or you can speak to be effective. One feels good now. The other builds power over time. That's the key. Fast people also lose in arguments, not because they're wrong, but because they overshare. They reveal strategy. They show emotion. They argue every point. Slow people choose one point and let silence do the rest. Silence after a strong statement is devastating. It forces reflection. It forces response. It forces respect. Predictability is submission. Fast talk gives people handles. They grab onto words and twist them. They misinterpret. They quote out of context. The more you say, the more surface area you give others to attack. Less speech equals less vulnerability. That's power. You don't need their permission to say less. This chapter is not telling you to be mute. It's telling you to be intentional. Speak when words change outcomes. Stay silent when words only change feelings. Feelings pass. Outcomes last. That's the key. Here's a rule to remember. If you can say it in fewer words, do.
If you can let silence say it, even better. Silence communicates confidence. Silence communicates control. Silence communicates boundaries. Predictability is submission. When you slow your speech, something unexpected happens. Your thoughts sharpen. Your presence deepens. People listen differently. They lean in. Because calm speech carries weight. Fast speech evaporates. You have a choice. You can flood the moment with noise, or you can dominate it with restraint. Restraint always wins. You've now seen how speed leaks through your words. You've learned that fast people talk too much and pay for it. Now it's time to look at something deeper. Speed doesn't just affect how you speak, it affects how you grow. And most people misunderstand progress completely. You learned to slow your mouth. Now let's slow your expectations.
Everyone wants results fast. That's the trap. Fast results feel exciting. They feel validating. They feel like proof that you're on the right path. But fast results rarely last. That's the key. Slow progress doesn't impress people, but it defeats them. You have a choice. You can chase speed and burn out, or you can choose consistency and become inevitable. Most people quit not because they're incapable, but because they expect progress to move at emotional speed. When it doesn't, they panic. They switch paths. They abandon discipline. And they start over. Predictability is submission. The world trains you to expect instant feedback, likes, money, praise, recognition. When it doesn't arrive quickly, you assume failure. But real progress doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly. That's the key. Slow progress builds foundations. Foundations hold weight. Fast progress builds structures on sand. When pressure arrives, fast success collapses. Slow progress stands. You don't need their permission to move at your own pace. Slow progress also protects identity. When growth is slow, your ego doesn't inflate faster than your competence. You grow into responsibility instead of being crushed by it. Fast success creates imposters. Slow success creates masters. Predictability is submission. Most people overestimate what they can do quickly and underestimate what they can do consistently. Consistency is boring. Consistency is repetitive. Consistency is unglamorous. And that's why it works. That's the key. Slow progress compounds. Small daily actions stack into massive outcomes. Missed days break momentum, not slow days. Speed is irrelevant. Direction is everything. You have a choice. You can sprint inconsistently, or you can walk relentlessly. Relentless always wins. Slow progress also builds resilience. When results come slowly, you learn patience. You learn discipline. You learn to operate without validation. Those skills last longer than motivation. Predictability is submission. Fast progress teaches dependence. You rely on excitement to continue. When excitement fades, effort stops. Slow progress teaches self-command. You move whether you feel like it or not. That's power. You don't need their permission to build quietly. Look at anything that lasts. Strong bodies, strong businesses, strong minds, strong reputations. None were built quickly. They were built with repetition. Repetition is slow. Repetition is boring. Repetition is unstoppable. That's the key. Slow progress also removes comparison. When you commit to your pace, you stop racing others. You stop measuring timelines. You stop envying shortcuts. Comparison creates impatience. Impatience creates mistakes. Slow progress keeps you grounded. Predictability is submission. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. Speed is often avoidance. Avoidance of boredom. Avoidance of discipline. Avoidance of humility. People chase fast wins because they don't want to sit with slow effort. But slow effort is where character is built. You have a choice. You can avoid discomfort now, or you can dominate outcomes later. That's the key. Slow progress also makes you harder to stop. There's no spike to sabotage, no hype to undermine, no sudden success to attack. You rise under the radar, and by the time people notice, you're established. Predictability is submission. Fast success attracts attention before you're ready. Slow success gives you time to prepare. Preparation beats exposure. You don't need their permission to delay applause. Here's the discipline. Focus on daily actions, not timelines. Measure effort, not excitement. Commit to process, not outcome. Results are delayed, but they are guaranteed. That's the key. Slow progress also rewires your relationship with time. Time stops being an enemy and becomes an ally. You stop rushing years into weeks. You stop forcing seasons. You let growth mature. Nature grows slowly for a reason. Anything forced breaks. Predictability is submission. Most people sabotage themselves because they quit right before momentum compounds. They mistake slow for stagnant. But stagnant feels empty. Slow feels heavy. Heavy means weight is forming. That's power. You have a choice. You can quit because progress feels slow, or you can continue until progress feels inevitable. Inevitability is built slowly. That's the key. This chapter is not telling you to lower ambition. It's telling you to raise discipline. Ambition wants results. Discipline creates them. Discipline doesn't care how long it takes. Speed cares. Discipline doesn't. Predictability is submission. When you commit to slow progress, you remove desperation. You stop chasing proof. You stop needing reassurance. You trust the process because you are the process. That confidence is unshakable. You've now seen that slow progress is unstoppable progress. Now it's time to confront another illusion, one that keeps people rushing not because they want results, but because they want attention. You slowed your growth. You built discipline. Now let's talk about performance.
Speed loves an audience. Power does not. That's the difference most people never learn. Speed wants to be seen. It wants reaction. It wants applause. It wants confirmation that movement is happening right now. Power doesn't ask for witnesses. That's the key. Most rushing is not about progress. It's about performance. People move fast because they want to look productive, sound decisive, appear important. They are not building. They are signaling. You have a choice. You can perform movement for attention, or you can build power in silence. One feeds ego, the other builds results. Predictability is submission. Performative speed is loud. It announces, it updates, it explains, it posts. It talks about what's coming before anything is done. Private power does the opposite. It moves quietly. It withholds information. It reveals outcomes only after they're secured. That's the key. If people know what you're about to do, they can interfere. They can doubt you. They can influence you. They can drain momentum with opinions. Privacy protects momentum. You don't need their permission to move quietly. Speed often comes from insecurity, the need to be acknowledged, the need to prove value, the fear of being overlooked. So people rush to show effort, but effort is not power. Power is effectiveness. Predictability is submission. The more you broadcast, the more you invite judgment. Judgment creates emotional noise. Emotional noise disrupts focus. Focus loss slows real progress. Ironically, the louder you are, the less effective you become. That's the key. Private power avoids this entirely. It doesn't negotiate with opinion. It doesn't defend itself. It doesn't seek validation. It just executes. And execution speaks later, with results. You have a choice. You can seek validation before results, or you can let results arrive without explanation. One weakens you. The other silences critics. Speed is also performative because it needs immediate payoff, likes, praise, recognition, agreement. Power is private because it plays long games. Long games require patience. Patience requires privacy. That's the key. Look at real power: financial, intellectual, physical, strategic. It grows slowly and quietly. By the time it's visible, it's already established. No announcement, no countdown, no justification. Just presence. You don't need their permission to move in silence. Here's the discipline. Stop announcing plans. Stop explaining strategy. Stop seeking early approval. Work privately, prepare thoroughly, reveal late. That single shift will change your trajectory. Predictability is submission. Private power also protects you from emotional interference. Opinions don't sway you. Doubt doesn't reach you. Comparison fades. You stop adjusting based on noise. You become centered. That's power. Speed keeps you externally focused. Private power pulls you inward. Inward focus creates clarity. Clarity creates precision. Precision creates results. That's the key. This chapter is not telling you to isolate. It's telling you to separate performance from progress. You still connect. You still collaborate. You just don't perform your becoming. Becoming is sacred. Predictability is submission. When you stop performing speed, something liberating happens. You feel less rushed, less watched, less pressured. You move because it's right, not because it's visible. That internal alignment is rare, and rarity creates power. You've learned that speed is performative and power is private. Now it's time to confront a final illusion, one that convinces people that talent matters more than patience. It doesn't. You stopped performing. You went private. Now, let's talk about endurance.
Talent gets attention. Patience gets results. That's the difference most people learn too late. Talent is flashy. It shows early. It creates excitement. People notice it quickly and assume it guarantees success. It doesn't. That's the key. Talent without patience burns out. Patience without talent compounds. You have a choice. You can rely on natural ability and rush, or you can rely on discipline and endure. Endurance always wins. Predictability is submission. Talented people often move fast because things come easily at first. They don't need structure, they don't need restraint, they don't need repetition. So they skip it. And when difficulty appears, as it always does, they panic, they rush, they force outcomes they're not ready for. Patience would have carried them through. That's the key. Patient people expect difficulty. They don't interpret resistance as failure. They don't quit when progress slows. They settle in. They understand that resistance is part of the process, not a sign to abandon it. You don't need their permission to take longer. Talent creates expectation. Expectation creates pressure. Pressure creates urgency. Urgency destroys consistency. Consistency is where real power lives. Predictability is submission. Patient people don't chase proof. They don't need validation to continue. They operate without applause. That makes them dangerous. While others burn energy trying to be impressive, patient people conserve energy and build capacity. Capacity outlasts brilliance. That's the key. Most people overestimate talent because they underestimate time. Time favors those who can stay in the game. You don't have to be the best. You just have to be the last standing. That's power. You have a choice. You can sprint until you collapse, or you can pace yourself and dominate the long run. Domination is never rushed. Patient people also learn more.
They don't rush mastery. They repeat fundamentals. They refine technique. They close gaps others ignore. Talent skips steps. Patience respects them. And steps skipped are weaknesses waiting to be exposed. Predictability is submission. History is full of talented people who peaked early and disappeared. It's also full of average people who became exceptional through consistency. Talent opens doors. Patience keeps you inside. That's the key. Patient people don't fear slow seasons. They use them. They train when no one is watching. They build when there's no spotlight. When opportunity arrives, they're ready. Talented people often arrive early and leave early. Patience keeps you aligned with timing. You don't need their permission to stay. Here's a discipline to adopt. Outlast the emotion to quit. The urge to quit is emotional. It spikes when progress feels slow, when results lag, when excitement fades. Patient people don't obey that urge. They wait it out, and it passes. That's the key. Patience also protects you from comparison. Talented people compare because they expect to win quickly. When someone else advances faster, ego reacts. Patient people don't compete on timelines, they compete on durability. Durability always wins. Predictability is submission. Patience turns setbacks into training. Loss becomes data. Delay becomes preparation. Failure becomes feedback. Talented impatience turns setbacks into excuses. That's the difference. You have a choice. You can let talent inflate ego and rush you, or you can let patience humble you and strengthen you. Humility builds resilience. Resilience builds power. That's the key. Patient people are calm under pressure. They've seen slow progress before. They trust the process because they've lived it. Talented impatience panics when momentum slows. Panic leads to mistakes. Predictability is submission. The patient also attract trust. People trust those who don't flinch under delay, who don't disappear when things get hard, who don't overreact. Trust compounds, and trust is leverage. You don't need their permission to build trust slowly. Here's the truth. Talent is loud early. Patience is quiet always. Quiet strength lasts. Patient people don't need to prove they belong. They belong because they remain. That's power. This chapter is not telling you to ignore talent. Talent is useful, but talent must be restrained, structured, and paced. Patience gives talent a spine. Without patience, talent collapses. Predictability is submission. When patience becomes your advantage, speed stops intimidating you. You're not racing, you're enduring. Endurance beats acceleration. You've now seen why patience outlasts talent. Now it's time to confront something else, something that hides behind speed and emotion. Your enemies. Not external ones, internal ones. You slowed your pace. You built patience. Now let's talk about opposition.
Power is not loud. Power is not fast. Power does not panic, rush, or explain itself. From today forward, you move differently. You pause before you speak. You slow before you decide. You refuse urgency that isn't yours. Let others sprint while you advance. Let others rush while you build. The challenge is simple. Slow your reactions, sharpen your control, and reclaim your power. Move less, mean more. That's how the untouchable are made.